It's the greatest mystery in literary history. A divisive question with highly contested answers. Who was the writer behind the pen name William Shakespeare? Welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger. Here's your host, Stephen Sable.
Hello again, fellow Quillers. Thank you for being here. It is indeed my pleasure to be your guide into this astounding world of literary mystery as we explore each and every avenue we find in an effort to get to the truth. That said, I want to take a moment to address some issues that have plagued this ongoing, decades-long pursuit to solve the world's greatest literary mystery. These issues have been troubling me for quite some time. You know, it has, and it is always to be expected that staunch Stratfordians will forever stand in the way of honest inquiry into the authorship mystery and its many roads of exploration. To their minds, there is no mystery. There is no question. They have their truth, and they're not going to budge. This is why I have so often stated my position that any and all attempts to break down the walls of the halls of academia, most specifically the literature departments, is like tilting at windmills and a tremendous waste of time and energy. Oh, I know there are academic Oxfordians out there who behave as if they are personally damaged by the rejection of the establishment, choosing to live in the shadow of those they call colleagues at colleges and universities, forever trying to gain acceptance into the professor's lounge like some kind of nerdy teenager attempting to be liked by the cool kids. But that personal ego-driven approach is a dead end for everyone involved, and it has only served to alienate fellow skeptics and doubters who could give a flea flick about the professors of the world and what they think or have to say about anything, let alone this enthralling mystery. During the past 4 years, I have welcomed nearly 80 guests to this program to share their various avenues of inquiry, their ideas for helping to solve the mystery, and their opinions of the details that have been discovered through the last century. I don't judge my guests. I don't judge my guests on the basis of their work or their theories. I don't discount their scholarship, seek their proof of advanced degrees, or rank them in some order against each other. I welcome all comers to this party of ours: researchers, honest skeptics, dabblers, hobbyists, literary lovers, mystery lovers, super sleuths everywhere. Everyone is welcome here. All of you. And I'm grateful that you tune in every fortnight to continue this exploration and hopefully help draw some converts along the way to join us here on the lunatic fringe of society. I learned this approach to acceptance of others through my lifelong involvement in the theater. Referring back to my earlier high school nerd analogy, I speak from firsthand experience. I was a theater nerd. I wasn't particularly good at any sport. I didn't fit in with the cool student government kids. None of the cheerleaders on campus ever wanted to date me. But it was all good. I had the theater, and I had my fellow theater nerd friends. On our school campus, we were the land of misfit toys, and we were proud of it. It was that pride of place and that feeling of acceptance which led us each to be more accepting of others who wished to be a part of our nerdy theater world. We accepted all comers. Theater departments across the country to this day remain a place where kids who might not otherwise fit in anywhere else know that they can always go to find acceptance. Some Oxfordians could learn from this philosophy, especially those who consider themselves to be at the top of Oxfordianism, whatever that actually is. But P.S., if you've spent your life trying to chiefly identify as the top Oxfordian, you may want to rethink your choices, especially if your skin is so thin that you live in constant fear of being associated with the rest of us Oxfordian nerds because we might tarnish your precious reputation as a serious scholar who is just one more book away from acceptance into the cool kid club or the professor's lounge on campus. Get over yourselves. If you're afraid of being called a conspiracy theorist, a kooky whack job, a tinfoil hat-wearing UFO chaser who is just one step away from becoming a crazed assassin with a copy of Catcher in the Rye in your back pocket, then here's a newsflash for you. It's already too late. The establishment has already grouped you in with the rest of us. You can't escape it now, no matter how many books you publish. So just know this. The only thing unacceptable in a nerd club is an elitist attitude. There's no hierarchy of Oxfordianism, and if you think there should be, then you're now a part of the problem and not the solution. You have become just like our establishment adversaries. You have created your own establishment of good old boys who believe they know more, have more place and standing, and live in superiority over others. To that I say, shame on you. I don't know a single person who has come to this mystery as a full-fledged expert Oxfordian like some Athena who sprang forth fully formed and perfectly armed out of the head of Edward de Vere. So the next time you see yourself as some demigod of Oxfordianism, check yourself. And then go check your ego at the door. Take a breath and remember where you came from, how you first started your journey into this mystery, the many times you first had it wrong, or the many times your beliefs have changed over the years as you continued your journey. Then, reach out to a fellow nerd who has more recently joined the party and offer to help guide them along rather than attempt to shut them down with your condescending superior attitude, which, by the way, behavioral science tells us is actually rooted in deep-seated fear and insecurity. Stop trying to please the cool kids of the establishment. Here in the Quiller Nation, we are the cool kids. Each and every one of us.
Hi, this is Jake Lloyd Bacon, founder of Dragon Wagon Radio, and it's that time of the year again. March 15th is my birthday. I turned 40. How the hell did that happen? Wait, no, that's not what I'm here to talk about. The day before that, March 14th, Dragon Wagon Radio celebrates its 6-year anniversary. Over the last half dozen years, Dragon Wagon has produced 20 different podcasts and over 1,600 individual episodes, all completely free to you, the listener, on every major podcast platform there is. And we want to ensure that the next 20 podcasts and the next 1,600 episodes stay free always. But we're a small independent network, and we need your support to do so. So, I ask you please take just a moment of your day today and visit dragonwagonradio.com/support. Watch the short video there to learn more about what DWR is, how it came to be, and the various ways that you can show your support during this, our 6-year anniversary celebration. Thanks to everyone who listens, subscribes, reviews, follows, and more. The community we have cultivated continues to be the best part of Dragon Wagon Radio.
My guest for this episode returns to us for his second episode. Many of you fellow Quillers will remember Jon Foss from a few episodes back where we had a very compelling discussion about the power of polymyth. And you can find that episode in the archives on the website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. If you want to re-listen to it, or if you haven't heard it, that's where it is. But today, Jon comes to us with a totally different angle and something that I think is just another testament to his brilliance, the polymyth that he happens to be as well. And he went to ChatGPT, AI, artificial intelligence, and basically asked the bot who wrote Shakespeare. Now, he didn't do it that simply, and that's why Jon is here today to explain to us his process and the formula he followed and how he kind of worked and reworked his line of questioning to make sure that the AI understood what it was he was trying to solve without actually leading it to a solution. And his findings are so compelling, and he's written them up, and those will be available soon. Yes, Jon? Excuse me.
Yeah, I'll put them up on. They're going into the DeVere Society newsletter, and they might even make them available online prior, so that people can listen to this and then look up the paper.
But members of the DeVere Society will be then not long from now receiving a newsletter that will include your write-up about this topic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe you'll even bring a bunch of copies with you to England.
Well, I am going to be headed that way not long after this episode is uploaded, so that's quite a possibility. But let me get to, because here's something I have to admit. I understand what artificial intelligence is, and I have some concept of how it works, but my exposure is very limited, and that's probably true about many of the listeners. And it has been sort of this trending thing lately because of the new advancements that have been made. And I know a lot of people have been logging into the system and bombarding the system with all kinds of questions. But if you could sort of lay the foundation for listeners so that they understand the avenue we're about to journey down together in the episode, that would be great.
Oh, sure. OpenAI is one of the artificial intelligence formats, and ChatGPT is the most accessible and probably the most powerful that's available to the average person now. And you got to go to openai.com and you can select ChatGPT, and you have to do your logins and things like that. And what you do is you ask it a question, and then it pulls together the necessary, information from the internet and from sources, vast libraries that it has available that are not available to you, and then tries to come up with an answer. And think of it as a chit chat. And if I ask it, like, what's the best color of yellow, and or what's the best color, and then I would sit there and then try to get down to what's the best color of yellow, and then what hue, and you can kind of drill it down a little bit. So it is subject a little bit to your queries, and you can lead it a little bit, but at the same point, if you do it correctly, you can actually dig down and get the correct answer and response. The first response might just be, it's pulling a Wikipedia article or something like that, and it's doing small sources. But you can actually try to drive it into doing novel thinking, and where it has to assess all of the evidence, and it has to do things. And the article is interesting because it is trying to delve into the novel thinking approach. It's trying to allow it to think on its own and weigh the evidence appropriately. So, and that's really what artificial intelligence really should do.
Now, you didn't just log into this artificial intelligence computer system and say, hey, who wrote Shakespeare? Because that would be obviously, that'd be ridiculous. So give us an idea of what your approach was to the artificial intelligence system. I mean, basically what you're doing is you're talking to a giant database, right? And I don't know that the system actually has a personality that's going to be conveyed or come out through. It's not like you're talking to a personified robot. It's still on your desktop or laptop computer, right? And you're typing in questions and it's sending back responses. But what was your approach to trying to get a logical answer? Because I don't know that you could go to a database and say, who really wrote Shakespeare, and have any kind of a response that would be coherent.
Yeah, no. And it's a language-based AI. And I should just go back a little bit. The reason I went into it is I was asked to write a review on Stephanie Hopkins Hughes' Educating Shakespeare for the April April newsletter for the De Vere Society. And I had, as you remember, written a review on Robert Prechter's Oxford's Voices, a remarkable work. It's 3,200 pages. It took me a long time, and I wrote that, and that one is in the July issue of last year. And I received incredible feedback on that one, and when you and I were at the De Vere Society at Hatfield House, many people just thought that was an incredible book review. And that's when they said, well, would you like to do another one? I said, sure, I'll do one. And I said, I think I'd like to do Educating Shakespeare. Basically, what did Shakespeare know? So Stephanie Hopkins Hughes' thesis is that he knew just about everything about every subject, but his primary core of competence was legal language and legal law and things like that. And one of the things that she breaks out is that, like, Act 4 of The Merchant of Venice is really a trial between the Chancellery and the Queen's Bench, between common law versus equity. And Shylock is has two possible sentences. One, he pays a fine, and the other one, he receives death. And Portia is really making clear that this debate, and and The Merchant of Venice was performed at a special meeting of the Inns of Court and all the parliamentarians who make all the laws and things like that. And Shakespeare is saying, hey, look what he knew. Look at the disparate judgments between these two, and he is advocating for one legal authority over the other. And within 10 years, Shakespeare's view of the law takes precedence, and it has ever since. So it's odd that a play like The Merchant of Venice is the vehicle that changes our legal system. And when so Stephanie Hopkins Hughes is saying, this is kind of an amazing thing. Like, someone could be that smart, that erudite, that he could woo an entire class of lawyers and legal minds. And so and then she says, well, he knew all these words, he knew all this and that. And so when I started this process, I was trying to prove her core theses, and I was drilling down. And so I asked basically 6 questions or 6 chats. And each one of those went back and forth a little bit, trying to drill down if Stephanie Hopkins Hughes was correct. And as we go through the chats, you'll see that her basic premise was correct, that Shakespeare knew it all.
Now, what does that exactly mean? He knew it all. He knew everything about the law. For example, he knew every. I mean, that's a pretty blanket statement, right? Shakespeare knew it all.
Yeah. So in Educating Shakespeare, basically talks about, what did he know? Well, he knew there are thousands of legal references. Sokol in 2001 did Shakespeare's dictionary, and there they list about 1,400 different legal, specific legal instances when legal words and obscure legal words, like pretermit, or I can't even spell what some of these words are. And he's using these in the canon. And, so it's legal was number one. And then, of course, he knows everything about, Ovid and all of the Italian and Greek masters. There's astronomy. There's a 500 page medical references, and he has 700 medical references, even more obscure terms than legal. And then he could speak 3 or 4 languages. He knew hunting and hawking and courtly sport. He understood just like there's no limit to what he knew, and then he was able to embody that information in iambic pentameter, which is like, well, I don't know how you do that, but he did.
Did
So
did you ask the computer to analyze his knowledge of all of these areas and his, polymath, the aspect of him, or did you drill down and focus on one particular area of study?
Yeah, so I focused in on the legal aspects of it, and there were some remarkable answers that came out of this, and I forwarded onto our friend Alexander Waugh, some of these answers. I said, well, this would be pretty good for the moot court. Like the computer, the AI is citing references that no one has ever seen before. Like I've never seen them, and I was actually trying to look. And like my first question was, how many legal references and words are contained in the Shakespearean works as contained in the long poem sonnets and first folio? After reading Sokol and Sokol 2001, it appears there are more than 1,000. This is an important question because it proves the author had extensive legal training. And then I get a remarkable response from that. And so that's the type of question. You're not really asking at first. You're just saying, well, what did he know? And you're kind of educating the computer, I should say the AI, that that this wasn't just a normal writer. And during the process of these questions, the AI was like realizing, well, just how much he knew. It just kept searching and searching and finding paper after paper after paper. And like, oh my Lord, like I didn't even know that he knew all this stuff. And just focusing in on Stephanie Hopkins Hughes, number one, hey, he was a lawyer. He had to be a lawyer, and not just a lawyer, but a really elite lawyer, an elite legal mind, a jurist, a judge, whatever. So, is that a pretty good answer?
Yeah. So one of the things that we hear a lot about this AI technology is that it sort of learns as it goes. And what I'm sort of hearing you say is that by introducing this line of question to the chatbot, it started doing its instantaneous searches of the massive amount of data it has available to it, which is, I would assume, like basically the entire internet, and then comes back with information from the perspective of, this is what I found, and what I found is teaching me that there is more to this question than what I originally knew prior to doing this search. Is that sort of sum up how the interaction started to become between you and the chatbot?
Yeah, 100. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I actually thought I was like, after a while talking to a person, it was really kind of scary, frighteningly like, wow, this really feels like a person. And it was digesting the information, and it was and so what happens is I ask that first question, then I might ask a little clarifying question, or what about this, or have you considered that? And then it gives you, can you give a response considering these factors? And for example, it comes up with a paper by Alan Gilbert from 1962, where he finds 2,771 legal references. And then another one by Daniel J. Kornstein, which says 3,000 words. And I'm like, wow. And like, I called Bob Prechter up. I said, Bob, can you help me find these references? And we sat there, and it took us the combined efforts about 2 hours to actually locate the papers. And we didn't even have access to the actual text of the papers. We could just find that they actually existed at one point in time. So someone at some point had put these obscure articles and things like that in, and then had created a database that the AI was able to harvest and be able to cite as references. And it was really interesting to see it work. And and cull reference after references, and there was far more than I had even realized in the canon.
That's kind of astounding. I mean, my brain is trying to wrap itself around the amount of computing power required by this machine to be able to access that information in its magnitude so quickly, and then not only find it all, place it all somewhere, but then analyze it and deliver an answer. And when you talked about the answer coming in the form of feeling like it's a person, clarify, is this, so you said it was language based. Are you speaking your questions into a microphone and then hearing the answers through a speaker? Are you typing them in on a keyboard and then they show up in print on the screen in front of you? How does that work?
Yeah, you're typing them in. And I would ask everyone, you should try it and understand just how it works, because I think it'll probably be the future at some point in time, and there'll be a lot of intelligence, working with you. I don't know when it will become, more common, but yeah, you're basically typing it in, and I guess you're asking, hey, ChatGPT, or I'm just thanks for the answer, and you go through, or that was an excellent answer. Could you consider this, or what about that? And then over the course of the 6 questions, the 6th question was designed to test the very, very limits of it. The 5th question was actually posed by Alexander Waugh himself, and he said, well, and he went into that. But the first questions were all based upon the legal, like, what did he know in the law? Like, what did he really know? Like, what did he do? Why is there 2 grave diggers that are debating, self-slaughter laws, while they're digging a grave in Hamlet? It's just such an odd thing that they're they're punning on real legal references. And it's because that, for a good portion of all these plays, they were in front of lawyers, and, that's how he did it. One of the references that he pulls out is Durant and Wood estimated that over 10% of all of the entire Shakespeare canon was around legal words and processes. 10%. It's a shocking amount.
Yeah, that's an astounding number. And, it's interesting to think that as you start asking these questions and leading the AI into the world of the authorship mystery, it's not unlike leading a newcomer to this mystery into the areas of study, this one particularly, the area of legal study. I think about lawyers that I know who I have talked to about the authorship mystery. And of course, you want to speak to them about something that they can relate to, that they have some context. And after a while, they are processing, like the computer, in their own brains, their own minds, their own knowledge of the legal system and the law as they know it, and have come to learn it as practicing lawyers. And at some point, it's interesting to watch this light bulb that kind of goes on, that now they are connected to the mystery and will forever see it as present. And it's funny because, the only difference is they don't have access to, I don't know how many trillion trigabytes of information that an AI has. It's, you got, it's like Google and Alexa had a baby kind of a thing is what you're doing. And then you're talking to this young child and saying, oh, by the way, there's this Shakespeare authorship mystery. What do you know about it? It's kind of incredible.
Yeah, well, I think that you have to realize that where it's starting, there may be 1 million papers and books that have been produced from a Stratfordian point of view on the authorship question, on Shakespeare. A lot of it is just defining, okay, what, different plays or different quotes or the sonnets or the poems or, whatever it might be. And they're all kind of they're all within the framework of the normal Stratfordian explanation. And I think you had James Warren on and basically cited there's 9,000 since 1920 to 2020. There are 9,000 Oxfordian publications, which is still a lot, but it's a literal drop in the bucket. And so if you go in, it's into this whatever the AI is thinking about or learning. The AI is harvesting, a 99.9% vat of Stratfordian, and it still came up with. I mean, I'm still blown away by Chat 5 and 6. I just can't even believe how awesome they were. I couldn't believe the results, and that was novel thinking by the computer assessing all of this. I don't know. It was remarkable. I think that's why, I had a couple people who said this is this little paper, is one of the best things that has happened in the last 20 years for the Oxfordian movement. I'm like, really? And they were like, yeah, this is really good. And
well, immediately when I saw it,
it's showing novel thinking.
I was privileged enough that you sent me an early draft of it. And immediately when I saw it and I read through it, I had a very similar feeling. And that's why I contacted you right away and said, okay, we need to do an episode on this topic. Yeah. I believe, I could be wrong. It's hard to say. I mean, this is technology that is available to anyone, but I believe that you're the first person I've heard of who has delved into this area on this mystery. And it's a brilliant idea. And I think and based on the responses that the machine, provided, and the way that you were able to, clarify your area of questioning, it seems to me that not only was the AI learning about this mystery, but you were also at the same time learning how to more effectively use the AI to get the information you wanted. And I clarify that, not the answers you wanted, the information you wanted, because you weren't able to convince it of anything other than its own assessment of the data that it had access to. And I think that's an important point. And I'd like you to expand more on that, because that was the most intriguing part to me, was that the machine didn't say Shakespeare was Edward de Vere. Like, that would have been great, but it didn't. And there was no chance that it was going to do that.
No, you see, the specific goal was to curate and quantify material irrespective of any authorship candidacy. So the first questions, were all about what did he know in legal words. So the first one is just looking at the entire canon, like how many is it? Well, it's about 3,000 legal words, and about 10% of the whole canon is around the trials, in legal words and legal-ish things. And then question 2 was, how many legal words and references are in the Shakespeare sonnets of 1609? And that question really hasn't really been answered. And the best I could kind of come up with was there was about 300. This is the sonnets really are about an incredible legal trial, and like a trial for the ages. And this is a person who is, Shakespeare, who's writing this, is the adverse party, but he is also the advocate for the person who is sentenced to death, and okay, well, who's sentenced to death and who gets off on misprison? Well, everyone knows there's only one person who is sentenced to death and only one person who got off on misprison. That's the Earl of Southampton. But I didn't even go there. I just said, okay, well, let's just figure out, what did he know? I'm just trying to prove one of the theses of Stephanie Hopkins Hughes is like, what did he know? Well, the answer is there's probably even more than 300 in the sonnets alone. So you ask a question, it gives you a quick answer. And then you sit there and say, well, what about these 3 words? Aren't these 3 in there? And he goes, well, I'm just trying to give you an answer. But since you ask, I'll give you even more. So then he let ChatGPT first gives you 10 legal words, then it gives you 25 legal words that are in there. And then it's trying to actually, and it's actually reading the sonnets. So like I said, went down to like question 3 is like, okay, let's just talk about one sonnet. Let's look at sonnet 87 that has the word misprison in it. And let's just look at, and it actually reads and it shows you it reading word, and it's highlighting, that's a legal word, that's a legal word, that's a legal word. I'm like, oh my Lord, it's actually reading the sonnet for it. It's like, and it's like, wow, yes, I guess there is a lot of legal words in this sonnet. It's just like, okay, it was pretty amazing. It was pretty amazing stuff.
So I'm thrilled. I'm glad that you kept it objective when it came to like not proposing any authorship candidate and just really questioning the intelligence on what the content of the works included. And then I believe you went into, okay, what does that tell us about the writer? And what did the intelligence come back with regards to any details about the writer that could be inferred from the data?
Okay, so we're now getting into chat. So chat 4 was all about sonnet 87, and then chat number 5, it was specifically designed to ask, give us a profile of what the likely author had to be. Just give us that profile. And so the question was, use the legal language of the sonnets in the Shakespeare canon, as well as the situations at court and in the plays. What is the most likely social position of the author of the plays? Please disregard all traditional ascriptions to the author. Okay. And so with that, you can sometimes like, okay, well now it sometimes will slow when you give it really, really hard questions. And it's like, okay, you have to determine who is the likely person that could have written this. So it has been over a period of a number of chats been harvesting this legal knowledge. Like, okay, I see. It knows these words and these words. Oh, no, it actually knows several thousand words, that are around the law. And boy, it's putting them into poetry, and then all these other things. It's educated itself on what kind of mind actually created it. And then the answers were quite remarkable. It basically describes on 3 or 4 different occasions during different variables and asking it, never naming Edward de Vere or the Earl of Oxford. It names, almost to a T, his profile. It's quite amazing.
So the intelligence sort of analyzes the profile of this writer based on the content of the writings, and in this case with a specific analysis of the legal terminology and knowledge that must be present in the writer's brain in order to achieve these feats of writing. It's almost like the artificial intelligence was analyzing the artificial intelligence of Shakespeare. Like it was basically putting the works of Shakespeare through its own steps, and in a way comparing Shakespeare as an artificial intelligence to itself, and saying, okay, well then it must have had access to all of this material, or it could not have provided the function that it demonstrates, right? It's almost like the AI analyzed Shakespeare like a fellow AI.
I never thought of it that way. That is actually brilliant, Stephen. That is actually a brilliant analysis. It's like, well, okay, I see these, yeah, I see the works, I see all the legal knowledge, I see all the medical knowledge, I see all the stuff, it had to know these languages, it had to source these books or whatever it's figuring out. And then it's saying, okay, well, what kind of person would even have access to those books, or what kind of person would have access to the legal knowledge? Where do they go to school? Well, they had to be, and just kind of going through that. Yeah, it really is an artificial intelligence database that's, trying to figure out which artificial intelligence database back in, between 1550 and 1620 could actually have done it. And yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I mean, that makes me really happy, because that's right. It's just, and you can apply it to just anything.
Well, that's kind of what, after reading your paper and now hearing you talk about it, that's kind of where my brain went as I'm trying to, and I don't know that it's possible to understand how an artificial intelligence is processing, even if you're the person who programmed it and created it. I think that once you've, there's that great fear of, Terminator and the Matrix and all those other sci-fi things that computers will eventually take over and kill us all off. And I know that there are people who've been asking this chatbot questions along those lines, just like you used to be able to ask Siri or Alexa if she was working with HAL 2000 in conspiracy to take over the world and, that kind of a thing. But I'm thinking along the lines of it can only do what it does. And in its mind, especially because Shakespeare is such a very ethereal thing, it just seems to me that in its mind, you're asking it about the Shakespeare, and it doesn't see Shakespeare as a man, doesn't see Shakespeare as a woman. I don't even know that it really sees Shakespeare as a human being. It sees Shakespeare as the Shakespeare, and its responses occurred to me are more about, well, the Shakespeare must have had this. The Shakespeare had to have had that. The Shakespeare includes this and this and this, and so therefore it needed access to this data, this data, this data. And I think that's the brilliance of it, because it doesn't have an opinion. It hasn't been taught for years in elementary school, middle school, and high school and college that the Shakespeare is the man from Stratford. It is simply trying to answer the question with the information it has available and in the context of how it processes information. And so I think that makes it one of the most objective sources in the world. And I think that's why people who are responding to this the way I have and the way you say others have, that this is so important to the authorship mystery, and perhaps, as you said, someone else implied, the most important thing to have happened in at least a decade, if not 2 or 3 decades, when it comes to eventually solving this mystery.
Yeah. I think you're right. And, if we want to talk about solving the mystery, I think one of the things, going back to Stephanie Hopkins Hughes, she really kind of delineates, you shouldn't use that word too many times. She specifies different epics in Shakespeare authorship. The first people just find it, and it's the discovery. And then there's the people who are trying to figure, well, what is this? And they're trying to figure it out. And they say, well, obviously there's a person named William Shakespeare had made this, and then they come up with a story, and they're literalists. They're just trying to figure it out. And, not really realizing that, like pseudonyms were, half of all of the works were either pseudonyms or allonyms in the Elizabethan era. I mean, it wasn't a time you always used your name, or you couldn't use your name. They didn't think that way. And hence they didn't really think about they're because they're so literal. They don't really get the jokes. They don't really get they don't get the inferences. They don't get when a person's punning their real name. They don't get it because they haven't got to that point. Eventually, the reason we want to have the authorship debate would be like the fourth epic. We're going to get past that is so we can sit there and say, you know what? you high achievement is hard won. It's like you have to study, you have to work, you have to try. If you want to win that gold medal, or if you want to write that great book, it's no happy accident. You have to really work at it. And it, for me as an educator, and I just want people to be aware enough, like, hey, you're all smart, you all have a brain, use it. And a story, a fanciful story like the William Shakespeare of Stratford is it hurts everybody. There's nothing good about that story. There's nothing, because it's not true. And I think that the AI sees that. In Chat 5, it knows the profile of the artificial intelligence. And by the way, I love how you said the Shakespeare. That's a brilliant thought, by the way. The Shakespeare. It's not a man, a woman, a Glover, or it's not a Corgi or whatever. It's the Shakespeare. It's trying to figure out what it was. So, I didn't give you a compliment there.
That's all right.
That was a long-winded answer.
Well, thank you. I've got, like, these are just the thoughts that are coming to me as we're having this discussion. It's one of the things that I love about this series, and one of the things that I love about being the host of this series is that I get to have these awesome conversations with people like you, and we get to kind of stumble down the roads together and find the mileposts as they occur. And, that just happened to be where my brain went as I was listening to you talk and thinking about how this system is processing data. And suddenly what you have, and I think that everyone would agree, and this is where the Stratfordians are going to run into a big problem as this technology continues to advance, is the technology is going to look at the Shakespeare as a database, as a very large, voluminous database. In fact, one of the largest ever in the history of pre-computing. And, you've got the Bible and you've got the complete works of Shakespeare as like the two largest databases prior to the internet. And I think that the system is going to look at those as that type of, not a rival, but maybe even as a colleague in data.
Yeah. My personal belief is that Edward de Vere was alive when the first folio was created. There's just too much detail. There's too many puns and different things, and there's too much cleverness with the numbering and the mispagination of the work. It is a literary and literal moonshot. If I were to say what would be more difficult, going to the moon in 1969 or having the first folio in 1623, I might say that the first folio is a lot more impressive. And I think that he basically faked his name the entire time, and eventually I think he just tired of being the Earl of Oxford. I think that the Essex Rebellion and sitting on that jury and trying and convicting and I think that was kind of the end of his courtly ambition, and he just wanted to do something higher and bigger and better. And the projects just got increasingly bigger and more complex afterwards. And because I think the Shakespearean canon, there's a lot of improvements that happen to from the quartos to the first folio. There's an improving of the language and improving of different things. I think this is one person who just kept improving over time. And it's 70 years worth of knowledge. It's not 54 years and then a sudden, death on Midsummer's Night's Eve in 1604. I think that it's a remarkable question that that also needs to be answered. Like this is a database of 70 years of knowledge, or 73 years of knowledge, not just um, uh, a short 50-year life. This is a remarkable thing. There's just too many references. There's too many things that
Well,
are
I
going
think
on
you're
here.
not.
And I think that
You're definitely not alone in proposing that theory. And I've had other guests who have proposed the same theory and who have made similar arguments that the First Folio of 1623 is such a perfect publication in so many ways, including, and this is the level of perfection of the publication, all of the things that were first looked upon and considered to be errors are actually purposefully done. And that takes a giant brain. It is remarkable. And some of our fellow scholars out there and super sleuths out there have been digging into that folio page by page, number by number, line by line, capital letter by capital letter, and finding all kinds of tremendous information. And I'm now sitting here wondering, if you were to guide the chatbot through that type of analysis, I'd be curious to see how it would respond to questions regarding, say, for instance, just specifically the use of capitalization in the First Folio. What trends are there? What does the AI find and see there? And what are its determinations based on analysis of that? And imagine that intelligence can do that so much faster than you or I can do pouring through our Norton facsimile of the First Folio.
Yeah, well, like it was pulling out legal words that I didn't even realize were legal words. It's just like, oh, because and I had Shakespeare's legal dictionary, and it was catching legal words that were not in the legal dictionary, and like, oh my Lord, it's just like it was comparing each word, and like it would go to a word, and then it would give the definition of the word and how it was relating, and the Old English. The amount of work that was doing was truly mind bending, and like, wow. I mean, if I think that it's just a matter of time before there's a determination where people will go like, there's just so much. I mean, one of the Stephanie Hopkins Hughes things is we can spend the next 400 years trying to dissect all the knowledge that's in the canon, and we're still not going to hit the end of it. Like we got to start now so we can just figure this out in the next 400 years. Like, this is the zenith of like what the human mind can actually do. Well, let's just figure this out, because we'll all be better people for it. And I don't know. It just, I don't want to spoil it when people read the paper. I think they're going to be really enthused about some of the answers to things like that. And I mean, the paper probably should have been 20 or 30 pages long, but we tried to make it digestible for,
it's really incredible
everybody.
because it's funny because you mentioned 400 years. It's 400 years later, and here we are trying to decipher this magnificent document, the First Folio. And as you mentioned, Stephanie says it could take another 400 years. And you and I are roughly in the same age bracket, and I'm sure you probably remember, and one of my favorite television shows as a young man growing up was Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. And, the premise is that he is put in a stasis of, temporary freeze for 500 years and comes back 500 years later, and they're trying to interpret him. And he's trying to share with them details about his world from 1987 to now, 25, whatever. And they're in, and this is what I'm getting at is, one of the characters, if you remember, was this little round computer called Dr. Theopolis. And it was basically like today's AI, right? And there were exchanges always between Buck Rogers and Dr. Theopolis where, he would ask some question and Dr. Theopolis would give this very AI response. Well, according to the database, Buck, blah-bitty, 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 blah. And we didn't have to wait 500 years to get a Dr. Theopolis. We have a Dr. Theopolis now who can do this analysis of things, right? And so that's going to fast forward us into... It may not take 400 more years then is what I'm getting at, and in order to discover all the clues in that first folio and take it apart. Because this machine now is going to be able, with the proper guidance of what you want it to look for, it's going to be able to find things so fast and put them together. And it won't be long, of course, before people are asking it, okay, well, here are the profiles of 8 different authors. We could Ross Barber it, right? Or we could Diana Price it. The places where these ladies have gone with their layers of investigation into what a writer of the time actually was and what connected them to their works, etc. And this machine's going to spit that stuff out. And now you're going to have a bunch of Stratfordians who are going to be denying the technology, denying the science, as the machine eventually says, well, it certainly could have been this person, and this person, and it absolutely had, to the degree of a 0.000.0 whatever percent chance, that it was actually this guy from Stratford.
Right. Yeah, it's no longer common sense or gut feeling. It's basically, it's like, okay, well, it's statistical probability. You had to know 4 languages. You had to have read these 400 books, that were super obscure and only available in 1 or 2 houses that the author had to have lived in or had access to. I thought was really interesting is when it got to some of the like chats 3 and 4, as it learned about how many legal words were in the sonnets, and kind of asking, was he a great legal mind or not? ChatGPT actually changes its mind. And that was really remarkable. Like in one of the early answers, it says overall, Sonnet 87 doesn't contain a significant amount of legal terminology. That was its first blush. It's like, oh, okay, doesn't matter. And then asking a question, he goes, well, actually, it's an incredible amount of legal knowledge. And the person obviously was very well versed in the law and was probably a lawyer and whatnot. You're like, wow, okay, because it was harvesting kind of the first ask it has is typically the naive one. It's just harvesting data that's out there and it's giving you kind of the rote answer. And then your job is to sit there and say, well, if you consider these words, what about that? And then it goes, oh, well, I will consider those words. And then it goes into detail as it considers, and you really have to push it to be novel thinking, kind of like in Buck Rogers, where I thought was the most fun, I guess, or illustrative of it, is when you started asking more and more complex questions, and watching it was really slowing down. And I was doing this at 3 a.m. on a Sunday, trying to get there. So like no one else was, on the system. So I could, just had alone time with it, and trying to find the lowest time that anyone would be on it. And it was, you could see it struggle. And when you got to questions 5 and 6, it was really quite amazing. Really quite amazing.
Well, it sounds to me
its
like
capabilities.
You were playing Socrates to this, new young learner. You were playing Aristotle to this Alexander the Great of technology in a lot of ways. And I don't want to say that you were, again, I want to point out your questions, and people will be able to read this when they see it in the DVS newsletter and when you make it available. But people will be able to see that you weren't asking it leading questions, hoping for the answer you wanted. You were merely just leading it down avenues of inquiry to see what answer it would provide once it conducted that inquiry. And so, your example there.
I never.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, you basically would say to it, here's a question I'm asking you. And it came back with an answer. And you said, yes, but have you considered these other angles of the question? And it went, oh, no, I haven't. Let me do that. And then it did that and it went, ooh, now that I've done that, I've come upon this. And then you said, well, what if we add this angle to it? What do we get? And it went, oh, I didn't do that yet. Let me do that. And it's really like, like Socrates, right? It's like the Socratic method of educating the intelligence through its own brilliance and access to its own brilliance.
Yeah, exactly. I never mentioned the Earl of Oxford or Oxfordianism or De Vere. I never did that. It was not about that. It was just about, well, what does he know? I mean, the Shakespeare legal knowledge, legal dictionary, whatever, is 489 pages, and it's one of 12 volumes that one's medical knowledge and knowledge of Italy and all these different things. It's like I was just going down one path, just one, and and just saying, okay, let's just focus in on this one thing. And so what I did is I started sending the outputs to Alexander Waugh, because I said, well, this is going to be important for the moot court. And then he was like, oh, well, this is wonderful. And then he was like, well, can we propose a question regardless of the authorship? And then it gives this great profile of who the person was likely, just based upon the legal knowledge. And imagine if you put all the other things in there. And so
well, you mentioned something. You said
it would be even
you said in Stephanie's book she references these epochs of times, of moments throughout history where we've come to where we are now. And you said something about the people at the time were like, oh, it's almost as if this book, the first folio, fell from the sky and hit the ground, and a guy stumbled upon it and went, ooh, look, here's a book. Well, the book is written by someone named William Shakespeare. So there must have been a William Shakespeare who wrote this book. Let's go find out who he was and where he was. And like you said, you mentioned they were like literalists.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest problems we've had throughout the period of study of this is, and this is unfortunately true, is it has been studied mainly by only English speakers. And I've had guests over the last year, particularly, who have been on the program who are fluent in multiple languages. And they have demonstrated that their knowledge of multiple languages has assisted them in their ability to study the works, because the writer was obviously fluent in multiple languages. And you see that through the etymology of certain words, as well as derivations of certain words, and the neologism that is involved, where he creates words by taking other words from other languages and creating an English word out of them. And many of the only English speakers who have studied this mystery for centuries and decades have never been able to dive deep into those words that way, because they don't speak fluent Italian and Greek and French and Spanish and Latin. But our guy did. And one of the things I think that I see in your paper and in the way you ask these questions and in the answers that the machine gave you is the machine does. The machine speaks all languages. The machine can make those connections immediately and look at a word and go, oh, that's actually an Italian derivation That's an English derivation of this Italian word, which is a legal reference. And that's why suddenly all these legal reference words were popping up that you said yourself said, I didn't even know that was a legal word. Well, probably because it derives from a similar word in German or French or Italian or Latin or Spanish. And he has taken it and done something to it because that's how his brain worked. He like I say, he was his own AI and had all these words and languages in his head that he could draw from. Well, the computer can do that too. And that's going to change the world of this mystery right there.
Yeah, exactly. When you go back to the words and etymology, one of the podcasts was really interesting where it had someone who's like, well, he was either Portuguese or Italian, I can't remember. And he's saying, well, it was really in this one particular play, this same sound kept coming up again and again and again, and it's important in our language. But Stephanie Hopkins Hughes says, well, one of the things he was a master, Shakespeare was a master at was rhetoric and the three disciplines of rhetoric. And then there are these little rules. I think there's schemes or something like that. And there's 200 schemes. And in one of it, like most people would not even know the 200 schemes of rhetoric, but on purpose in one work, or I can't remember how it goes. I have to go back and remember. It's in chapter 2 of Educating Shakespeare. Shakespeare uses all 200 on purpose. Shows that he can use all 200 schemes in rhetoric. I mean, you think about that. He's not just showing off. He's showing off that he knows all the rules of rhetoric. Like, oh, and I can use them. And no one I don't even know what really rhetoric. I know what rhetoric is, but I have no idea what the 200 schemes of one of the three branches of rhetoric are. And that I could actually use them and then show off that I can use them all. It's dizzying to even consider. And I think that's where she is, so respectful of the knowledge. Like, well, like how is it even possible a person could know this much? Well, obviously the AI you're saying the same thing about that. Well, how can it know so much? How can it know and have read a paper from 1962 that's not published on the internet, that's referenced, but it somehow had access to it and somehow was able to read it and somehow able to count the 2,771 words, legal words? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. And I think you've touched on another series of clues that I think we should be looking at more in detail. And I can't wait till there are those who will now have AI analyze just specific plays. And that's going to be happening now. You had it analyze a specific sonnet. Now let's have it analyze all 154 sonnets. Let's have it analyze each specific
one
play.
by one.
And as you mentioned, certain plays, and I believe this to be true. It's one of the reasons why I love Titus Andronicus, and I think that it is such an undervalued and underpopular play. He does this. He takes a play and every play is filled with several messages. Obviously, there are messages all over the place in each play, but each play has a specific reason first. And some of them, it really is just about showing off what he knows. And I believe that Titus Andronicus is about him showing off how much he knows about Greek mythology and Greek history and the masters of Greek and the masters of Greek drama. And that's what Titus Andronicus is mainly about, is him just blustering. Look at what I know and can put all in one play and blow away the competition with my knowledge. And again, it's as if you asked the AI to write a play that incorporates superior knowledge of these topics. Then the AI might put out a Titus Andronicus. So I think it's going to be interesting then as we start analyzing plays to try to see what exactly was Edward doing here. Was he, bristling his feathers like a peacock to say, look how smart I am? Was he taking aim at a particular political cause? Was he taking aim at a particular social injustice? Was it an injustice he felt that had been done to himself, because that's common in many of the plays? I think that that's a big area that we'll be able to get into now in more detail using this new technology.
Oh, absolutely. We talk about I think the process of becoming a polymath, being expert at everything, and it's like every bit of knowledge to him, it's like you're walking along a beach with a million stones and he's finding these bits that are important and he saves them all. He recognizes, almost with a childlike mind, like, hey, I had this bit of ancient mythology, and he's putting it into Titus Andronicus. And I think Titus Andronicus came out in 1593 anonymously, not as Shakespeare, at the same time as Venus and Adonis. Is that correct? I think so.
There's a lot of speculation about the date, but I happen to believe that it came later than that, but.
Yeah, well, I can't remember. It was in one of your podcasts with Earl Showerman, and he was saying that in order to produce the play, it needed the 3 acting companies of the close personal friends or people who married the daughters of Edward de Vere. It's like, okay, well, yeah, you need 3 acting companies, and those 3 acting companies happen to all be dating your daughters. Okay, well, yeah, it's pretty obvious, who it was. But I don't want to get too far off. I think I do want to spend a little time on question 6, because I think trying to figure out exactly what it could do, like was in proposing a question, I thought was pretty interesting. I'm not sure we haven't really, you and I have not discussed the 6th question, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts were on it, because you actually have some really good thoughts on this paper.
I was intrigued that's where you went. Like, I was surprised to see it. Ironically, I was surprised but not surprised that's where you went. That's how you sort of wrapped it up and concluded was going down the road of, okay, well, now where does this guy rank in the history of all type of a thing, and what does that tell us about him as well? And I loved that, and like I said, I was surprised that I was like, oh, and then I went, well, of course that's where Jon would go, because Jon has this wonderful connection with the study of, I don't even know if this is a word, but I'm going to try to create a word out of it. Polymathy. Polymathy. Yeah, the art of the polymath. How about that?
It's probably
that was my Shakespearean attempt at neologism. Now, are you going to reveal the list? Do you want to reveal the list here on the program, or you want to keep that as like the secret nugget? They have to go read it, because I was so.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we can talk. I think we.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the list is. I think the list is. I think maybe should save it so people want to read it, because there's 28 names on the list, and trying to get it. When you first ask a question, okay, well, give me a list of polymaths, and it just kind of gives a quick answer like blah, 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 and then you're like, okay, well, let's just start weighing. Like, here's the definition of it. Let's talk about what exactly what were their achievements in multiple categories and this and that, and then trying to have it start quantifying a list of people who were not just good chemists, but they were good at chemistry and biology and philosophy and whatever, like Goethe. Widely considered, there's people who've read every single word of Goethe, and the German polymath, and he was an expert in biology, but he was also in chemistry and then philosophy and like literally everything. He could write. And what drives a person to do that? Like, what's the framework in their head? What's the artificial intelligence, the database that can allow a person to remember stuff in such a massive amount of stuff? Because I guess that was the reason behind it, because that's the only way you can describe the knowledge base behind Shakespeare. It's and then to put it into poetry or into dramatics, or it's just, I don't know. So that was the motivation of asking that question, which is really kind of the ultimate question that the educating Shakespeare is like, well, let's figure that Stephanie Hopkins Hughes is like, well, let's figure out whatever he did. Let's figure out and do that for everybody. Okay. Yeah. Like, what, we're on we're all going to be on the Shakespeare train. We're all going to try to be that knowledgeable about everything. And
well, here's the problem with that, though, and this
that was the motivation.
Here's the problem with that, and it connects to this list, right? And just to and people will have to look at the list in order to see who falls where. But some of the names on the list we can reveal, but we won't say what order they fell in. Obviously, Shakespeare's on the list. Benjamin Franklin is on the list. Mozart is on the list. People right now listening to this are shouting out names of their own, I'm sure, that they would believe belong on the list. Thomas Edison belongs on the list. Henry Ford probably belongs on the list. I don't recall if he was there on that list in that like top 25 or not. But the point being is, here are people who definitely qualify as
he's not on the list.
History's greatest polymaths, right? And one thing particular that they all have in common, above and beyond this exceptional knowledge and ability to dabble in multiple worlds and do so successfully in multiple worlds, one of the things that they all particularly have in common is that they had very troubled lives. They were so driven. They were so overachieving that it interfered with other aspects of their lives, whether it be their relationships with other human beings, spouses and children, or whether it was their ability to conduct themselves properly in society, or in some cases they became recluses or hermits and would, there's stories about Edison from his own wife about him locking himself in his lab for weeks at a time and never even talking to her or the children during that time. So I don't know that Stephanie's theory is actually a good one. I don't know that we all should be Shakespeare. That could be very damaging to society. But there's another aspect that we need to look at about the polymath, and that therefore whoever the writer Shakespeare was not only exhibited all this exceptional knowledge, but probably should have shown some signs of having difficulty dealing with all of that knowledge in his head at all times.
Without a doubt. And sorry, I had a message come in and I had turned everything off. So I'm just trying to make sure that we don't get disturbed like that again. I don't think that the idea is that we can all be Shakespeare, I think, or Leonardo da Vinci or Albert Einstein or Isaac Newton or Aristotle or Galileo. I mean, I think it's just saying, well, that's what is possible. And, it's like, if I were to use swimming example, like, hey, everybody can swim the butterfly, backstroke, breaststroke, and freestyle. Everyone can, do this and that if they just have enough time and effort and they have the right instruction. We all can swim extraordinarily well. Like we all have that ability. Now, a few of us could set the world record, and maybe one or whatever, three, but that just shows the ability of what people can do. And everybody can read. Back in the 1500s, I think it was generally believed, or 1400s, or someone said that only a few people even had the ability to read. Well, now we know that's totally wrong. That 99.9999% of the population can read. They just have to have access to books and learning and stuff like that. And so, what was general convention back in the 1500s, that only 10% of the population was smart enough to read. It was completely wrong. And I think that those biases are the big problem. And one of the reasons um, that hold back human achievement is that we don't strive for what is the possible in every person, and and being highly ethical, or being intelligent about your decisions and stuff, whatnot. One of the things that Stephanie Hopkins-Hughes talks about is that on occasion there are lots of prodigies, there are lots of really good people, but only a few become creators who kind of change change something. In the case of Shakespeare, he changes the English language. He takes it from kind of a bunch of different Northern European dialects, and he creates this magical, language that's very illustrative of any image you can possibly think, using Henadides, or however you say that word. Is that he actually created the English language that we know today, and kind of set the standard for everybody. And 400 years, we still can't believe it, that it's that good. And but the list, maybe we can go back to the list here. I can tell you number 29 on the list, that didn't print off, was Goethe. He was always near the bottom of the list, but when he got to Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, each time it got to Wolfgang, it stopped. It was like it just kept clicking. Remember the movie War Games with a long time ago, where it was
more of the 1980s coming back into this episode.
It was blinking as it was trying to process it, blinking, and literally it could not come up with a score for Mozart. It couldn't, because the score is 1 to 1,000, where 100 is a very, very successful professional individual. Okay, and that 1,000 would be the ultimate. Of course, Leonardo da Vinci is a 950. And Shakespeare's a 900, and everyone else on the list is, kind of below that. And, just to give an idea, Steve Jobs is a 900, which is kind of remarkable that there's a modern day person that did something so much or so momentous or changed the world. And I wonder if the AI, that's interesting that it,
is it biased? Did it actually demonstrate some bias? Because without him, it doesn't exist. That's interesting. That's a whole other topic, isn't it?
A little bit. I said, at one point in time, I looked at the list was all like, ending in like 19, like Werner von Braun was like in the 1970s, and I had cut and pasted a whole bunch of maybe 50 different names or 40 different names, and say, well, evaluate these people or whatever. And then some of them, they made the list, some of them didn't make the list, but there was a lack from 1970 on of different things. I said, well, can you consider, more recent candidates, people who have lived in the last, 50 years, or, let's talk about that. And it came up with 2 on the list: Elon Musk and Steve Jobs. I thought that was pretty interesting, and gave them 2 very different scores. I think 600 for Elon Musk, he's got some work to do, and 900, one of the highest scores was for Steve Jobs, which was, obviously a computer guy.
Yeah, very interesting.
So, yeah, it was really, really interesting. But the fact that it couldn't come up with a score for Mozart, I think, just like, man, I don't know how he did that. I don't know where it would be. It just kept timing out. And I tried it 2 more times, and I could not get a final full list of 30. So it's published as 28 with a question mark for Mozart.
That's incredible, and I wonder
he would have been on the list.
That's very interesting, and I wonder if it has anything to do with the short lifespan, perhaps. Because of all of the names that we've listed, many of them lived at least pretty full lives, and Mozart's the only one I can think of that we named that did not live a long, full life. And so I wonder if it could have something to do with that.
Well, yeah, 700 works in 35 years, and then there's like 150 incomplete works, And I didn't. This isn't part of the paper, but I reference it. Is I spent a better part of a week just trying to have it nailed down. Like, well, how many hours would it have taken, like Mozart, for example, to write? First of all, learn how to be great at music, and how to write it, and then how many hours would it have taken? And I cited papers on the like from Anders Ericsson that it's 150,000 hours or whatever 100,000 hours, and I said just try to quantify like how hard, and the AI couldn't do it. It couldn't come up with a number. It couldn't come up with, well, how long would it take to actually write these 38 plays and all these poems? And I'm not even asking like a specific person. I'm just saying, just look at this and like tell me how much time it would take to write it. Considering human potential, human whatever, and it would it says can't really do it. I can't come up with a number. It was kind of inconceivable for it. It was really interesting.
You're asking it to
really interesting.
Complete a mathematical equation without enough information. There's not enough reference points, right? So if you said, compare the lives of these particular people and their accomplishments, then it might come back with, well, it took this person 75 years of life to accomplish all of this, and it took this person 35 years of life to accomplish all of this. And I think it would need more reference points to then create some sort of an average. Otherwise, I think that computation is not possible, because what idea does it have of the art of human creation and what kind of time that actually does take? It has no reference. It can't. It can't have a reference.
It's really, a lot of times it would, when you ask very challenging questions, to try to figure out, it would give an answer like, as an AI language model, I do not possess personal beliefs or opinions, nor can I confirm or identify for example, the identity of the author of the plays attributed to William Shakespeare. Like it was aware that, and I didn't ask it, I was basically saying, just tell me who the specific, like what are characteristics of that person? And it immediately answers like, hey, you're asking me, if you're asking me, I'm not going to tell you who the author was. It's like, it was aware enough to like realizing the genre of the question. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. Like, I didn't ask you who wrote it. I asked you to give me a profile of the person who would have wrote it. It's like, it was kind of aware, of what human capabilities were and like the skill set a person would have to have in order to do that. But I think for it to amalgamate a list of how many hours it took to do Beethoven's work, or Charles Dickens, or different things, it wouldn't be able to do that, because that's hard. That's a really, really hard question, and it's not a human. It never had to build something.
Right, but I do think it's interesting.
Has the knowledge and thinking.
This actually has the potential to break the machine. Ride with me on this path for just a moment. It is analyzing all this data, and it comes to the determination that the Shakespeare must have had access to this inordinate amount of data in its database. Right. So AI, going back to it, it's seeing the Shakespeare as the Shakespeare and not as a person. Right. Because the Shakespeare must have had access to all of this information, these foreign languages, this knowledge of the law, this knowledge of hawking, this knowledge of court, blah, 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 blah. Right. And then if you did ask it, okay, well, now tell me who was the Shakespeare. And it goes in and it starts analyzing everything that's been written about that and all the data it can find about that. And I feel like it would come back with this does not compute, and start smoking. There's smoke coming out of your computer.
Sizzle, smoke.
Yeah, because it can't justify. And in its answering to you unprompted without asking, it volunteered. And I did find that interesting that you didn't ask it identify who the writer is. You said, give me an idea of what skills the writer must have had, what knowledge the writer must have had. And it offered on its own this like prefatory statement saying, I cannot tell you who the person is beyond a reasonable doubt. I have no ability to share with you a definitive answer on this topic. And that in itself is noteworthy because that is intellectually honest. And what's wrong with the Stratfordians is they refuse to be intellectually honest about this topic. The rest of us are very willing to say, we're not sure, which is why we want to study it, which is why we want to find out. The computer itself says, I'm not sure. I can keep studying, but I don't know the answer yet.
Yeah. Well, one of the thoughts I did is, okay, let's take 20 authors. Do not tell me which one it is, but let's just give a profile of all the candidates, and then work backwards, considering these 20 facts. Okay, there's 400 references to Italy. They would have known 3 languages. They had to they had to perform plays at the Inns of Court. They had to do this. They were cited as being the best playwright for their generation. Webb in 1588 says that about that De Vere was best for comedy, and and sit there and you just say, okay, I don't need you to actually tell us who it is. Just give us the odds. Let's just give it the odds. And then say, okay, glovemaker's son who had illiterate parents, who had illiterate children, who could not sign his name. What are the chances that sued people that was, for pennies, that was, accused of hoarding grain, gave a second best bed, like this. You sit there and give what's the real biography of Shakespeare of Stratford, and you go, okay, AI, why don't you just tell me the odds? I know you can't give me the answer, but just give me the odds. That'd be an interesting chat. That would be very interesting.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying earlier in the episode. I think you have opened the door now to an entirely new world of inquest into this using this technology. And I agree. I think there will be others who will focus in on very specific things, such as those probabilities. This will open the door to an entirely new form of stylometrics and the comparisons of styles of writing, because it's different than the previous computer analyses that we have seen of stylometrics, because now it is this computer brain that is analyzing everything that it has access to come to a determination. And even, like I say, even if that determination is, I can't provide a definitive answer. That's a victory for all of us who are pursuing the truth of this mystery, because it forces, I mean, you can't force Stratfordians to do anything, obviously, but it forces any intellectually honest person to admit that there is a reason to ask these questions, that the answer is not definitive. And if you think it is definitive, then you're saying you know more, you are smarter than this chatbot that has access to all the world's knowledge in an instant. And that's just not possible. So be curious to see how, as this starts to unfold, how Stratfordians are going to respond.
They really can't. They really can't, because it is a database of knowledge that can assess another database of knowledge, and just for example, when Edward de Vere goes before the Council of Ten in Venice, and I think Delahoyd is the one that went there and looked at the records from 1574 and found, his appeal. Can I go look at the famous paintings on the wall, on the ceiling of your parliament, or where your courtrooms are, or the Doge's palace? And he gets 20 votes in the Council of 10 of the 20 most powerful families, and they find the signature, this and that, and sure enough, those paintings and different things appear in the works, right? Well, okay, you've now just limited it to a tiny percentage of people. The average sailor is not going up there and then going to the Mermaid Tavern and telling, well, let me tell you about all the paintings on, in the Chief Justice's room in Venice. I'll tell you about that. No, I mean, it's a very specific person who would even have access to something like this. And he had to sign his name, and you get down to specific examples. There's no way that Shakespeare of Stratford would, first of all, even care about it, right? He wouldn't care. He didn't speak Italian. He couldn't, do all of this. He couldn't have the legal acumen to actually have an appeal before a council in another place to be able to go see these rare paintings. And just like if you look at one data point like that, it's the game's over here. But the monolith of thought, it's almost like the average person, like if you, which I think is just as interesting, is like how all these Stratfordians they lock together like a bunch of cows and bulls in a field, and they protect their little candidate there. And when it's absolutely absurd, it's completely absurd that even this on that one data point, being able to view those paintings in Venice, it's kind of mind numbing that they can't get past it. That they have that their authority is so pinned to this fake story that they can't back down. They can't back down. They can't be intellectually honest. They're just kind of stuck, and because they're stuck, you can't go into the next phase of Shakespearean study.
Well, then at some point, we'll be able to feed each of these anecdotes, each of these incidences, this circumstantial evidence into the AI, and then again, ask the AI, what are the probabilities? What are the odds that the writer was this guy? What are the probabilities? What are the odds that the writer was this guy? I've mentioned in previous episodes, Annie and I are planning our trip to Italy for this coming fall. And one of the things that
Awesome.
We've already booked is we're taking a boat from the San Marco dock there in Venice up the Brenta River to Foscari. Portia's Belmont.
Oh, Villa Foscari.
Yeah. And, when you look at Villa Foscari as the location of Portia's Belmont, and you add together all of the items that make sense from the frescoes inside that are mentioned in The Merchant of Venice in reference to Portia, the distance from the villa to Venice that she would have had to have taken a boat in order to get there to appear in disguise as a lawyer at the trial in court. That's all one thing. But then when you look at the fact that Henry of France had just come through there and how well documented his trip is, and that he had visited there right before returning home, which is right before Oxford shows up at his court first before going to Italy. And you look at, okay, well, wait a minute. Here's a guy who took this trip to getting home to France. Suddenly, Edward de Vere shows up in his court. They're talking about the fact that he's headed to Italy. You don't think Henry says to Edward, "Oh, hey, while you're in Italy, you really should go check out the villas along the Brenta. It's a sight worth seeing. You don't want to miss it."
Go to Villa Foscari.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's just like that inferential knowledge is just like, it's so important. Like, oh my gosh, that's like another data point that's so neat. By the way, when you go to, I've been lucky enough to go to Venice. You should follow my rule. When you go to Venice, try to, hopefully you're flying in and you have you could take a taxi or you can take a train or whatever it is, but you should take one of the water taxis, because you should have a rule. Whenever you arrive in Venice, you always arrive by boat, and then tip the guy an extra, 10 or 20 or whatever, and say, "Can you drive the whole of the Grand Canal kind of slow?" And they'll go, "Sure." And then you get a free tour of the entire Grand Canal. That is the best money you'll spend. And it's truly wonderful. And you can stand there in these beautiful wooden boats as you kind of just go right through and just take in this ancient city.
Well, as a matter of fact,
awesome.
we're
Just driving.
driving. We're driving into Venice from Padua and delivering our rental car there at the station in Venice. And then it's actually not a far walk from there to our hotel. But then when we do need to get to the docks at San Marco, we'll take the water taxi. We can take the water taxi then, either coming or going back, either way, to getting back to our hotel. So I will take your advice on that. But again, it's just another layer of all of the database. And again, it's the Shakespeare has all this database. The Shakespeare is the AI of the 16th century. And I think that the modern AI recognizes that and is going to constantly, when queried, come back with responses that acknowledge that extreme amount of data, because that's how it functions. And I think you have, sir, opened the door to an entirely new world of research and study on this mystery that is going to help bring about a paradigm shift. Again, as I say, at the very minimum, it's going to force those who claim they're smart to, at the very least, say there is reason to doubt. There is reason to question and to seek the truth.
Yeah.
That's a huge victory.
Well said. And I tell you, thank you very, very much. And it was just a thrill. And I have to thank two people. Thank you as well for your comments, but also Robert Prechter, just sourcing and kind of, he went through it, and he went through, and we went and tried to find all of the sources, and it took us a little bit of work, and realized that we had to do a little work that it was using an additional database that's not really out there. It was Bing's version of Google Scholar, and which is not online. So it has the secret not online database. It was kind of interesting. And I also have to thank Alexander Waugh, the president of the De Vere Society, of course, in his famous YouTube channel, for his help as well. They both did quite a bit of work on it, and I do need to thank them as well.
Well, I'll be seeing the great Alexander in about a week at the moot court trial there at Middle Temple Hall in London. I'm very excited about being able to attend there. And I, of course, fellow Quillers will bring back information and news from that event for you in future episodes. Jon, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share this wonderful new road, this grand boulevard of inquiry that you have now opened up. And your findings, folks, if you are not a member of the De Vere Society, you should consider joining that organization in order to have access to these types of things, including their newsletter that will include Jon's work. I hope that Jon will see fit to post it somewhere that I can link it for you all to explore and look at. But I would also encourage you to go onto the site and start asking the bot your own questions. Why not? Let's see where that leads.
Yeah, I'll ask Alexander if they'll post it early on, prior to the moot court, as a way to kind of promote it, and maybe they can post it on the De Vere Society website.
Yeah, that will be.
But I can't promise that, of course.
Sure, but you've opened the door. This is going to be an exciting new realm. I'm sure my brain is spinning right now thinking about all the ways that this can be useful and where it might lead. And I'm certain that my limited capacity hasn't even touched on the potential here, that others who are smarter than I am will be able to figure out how to make use of it. And at the very minimum, maybe it helps to start weeding out some of the roads of inquiry that we have pursued in the past. Maybe if nothing else, it helps eliminate candidates or theories as we go along, and helps us refine and get closer to a narrative that makes sense, that is closer to the truth. I mean, that's what I believe is necessary here. That's what Justice Stevens said so many years ago was necessary in order to solving this mystery. And of course, again, back to that legal theme, that's what a legal mind would say, is give the jury a narrative that they can agree on, and you will have won your case. So this might actually take us a step closer to that. And I believe that that's what we need to be focusing on, is the narrative of truth.
Mm-hmm. Well done. Well said.
Thank you again, Jon. Always a pleasure. And ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Our guest, Jonathan Foss, and his pal, ChatGPT. Before we wrap things up for this episode, fellow Quillers, I do want to remind you that you are all welcome here, and we are thankful to have you. Out of the millions of entertainment options out there, we appreciate that you choose to spend some of your time with us a couple of times each month. We especially want to thank those of you who directly support the show through our Patreon account. We can't keep it going without your valuable contributions. So thank you. Thank you. And remember, you can visit our Patreon account for free. You can learn more about the show, view our posts on our public news feed, participate in the discussion, learn more about our guests and their work, and keep informed about all things to come that are Don't Quill the Messenger in nature. You can also follow us on Facebook at our Don't Quill the Messenger Facebook page, which, by the way, is also a great way to gently share the Quiller Nation with friends who might find our mystery as intriguing as we do. Just do a little sharing of one of our posts or our Facebook page to see if a friend or relative might click in to learn a little bit more on their own. Who knows? You may have more fellow nerds on your social media friends list than you think you do. And of course, you can always drop us a note by email to contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com. Contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com. And as I always say, I answer every email. Sometimes it takes me a little time to get to them all, but I always answer every email. Your comments are important to me. And now, here's our very own producer Jake to announce our March 2023 Quiller of the Month.
Thank you, Stephen, and hello, Quillers. I am back once again with the honor of spinning this wheel. What wheel am I talking about? I'm talking about the wheel that's loaded up with all of the names of eligible patrons for the monthly Quiller of the Month contest. If you don't know what this is and you want to be involved, you got to head on over to patreon.com/don'tquillthemessenger. Become a patron of a qualifying tier, and it is as simple as that. You are entered into the contest each and every month that you are an eligible patron. And without further ado, I think we get on with it. What do you say? The Quiller of the Month for the month of March. Clare Jaget. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. I feel like I say that every time, but Clare Jaget, you are the Quiller of the Month for the month of March. Keep an eye out on your email. We will send you instructions on how to claim your winnings. Of course, each and every month, the Quiller of the Month gets not just the clout and the title bestowed upon them, but a free item of your choosing from the shop over at dragonwagonshop.com. Thanks again to each and every one of the patrons of all tiers who continue to support this fantastic program. I greatly appreciate you. I know Steve does as well, because he told me once in the 5 seconds that he wasn't speaking about Shakespeare. He said, "Hey, I really appreciate all the patrons." And I said, "Hey, you didn't talk about Shakespeare for 5 seconds." And it was a record. Okay, I'm done. Back to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Jake, and congratulations to our winner. To learn more about how you can be entered into our monthly drawing, visit our Patreon page. It's an easy red button on the homepage of our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. And until next time, fellow Quillers, say it with me out loud, my brothers and sisters of nerddom. Keep asking questions.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and review in your podcast player. For even more, visit our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. There you can find official merchandise in our shop, as well as a link to our Patreon. This show is made possible by people like you. We hope you'll consider showing your support by becoming a monthly patron, where you'll receive bonus material and tons of exclusive perks. You can also join in the conversation on our Discord and by following us at Don't Quill the Pod on all social media. All of this can be found at don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com.
It's Dragon Wagon.